So, welcome to Sheep Stuff You Should Know with Dan Macon up here in Auburn. And who are you?
Ryan Mahoney down here in Rio Vista.
Outstanding. And this is the third taping, but the second episode, I think, right?
Yes.
Very good. Very good. I'm not sure that anybody should have to listen to this much sheep stuff, but I think it's been good.
Yeah, it's been fun for me.
It has been very fun for me. And you obviously had done your homework last week, so you set a very high bar, and I've had to think about questions that I wanted to ask you this week. So if you're okay with it, I'll just start off. I think I've got one that'll generate some conversation here.
Yeah, let's go ahead and give it a go.
So, I think it was obvious from last week that both of us treat our sheep operations as businesses, but we're operating at vastly different scales. And I'm just curious about whether you use any particular benchmarks or analysis tools that allow you to evaluate the success of your business, whether it's in the production realm or the financial economic realm. But what are the things that you look at from a business perspective in your operation?
Yeah, so yes, we definitely very much run this as a business. This is my full-time job, and it provides the sole income, or my wife's also a teacher, but she just went back to teaching this last year. So up until she went back, this was the sole income for our family. So we don't do anything outside of the ranch, and so it is very much a business, and we take that approach. I think just to say right off the top, I think one of the common misconceptions by a lot of people about agribusiness or agriculture in general, that if you're doing it for a profit, you don't care about what you're doing. And that could be not further from the truth, because it took me about 1 month on the job to realize that the well-being and welfare of your animals is directly related to your financial success. And so if you don't show up, you don't take the extra time and take care of the water issues, manage the feed, you don't put in the extra effort and don't work and put the priority of that animal first, you fail from a business perspective more often than not. I think my favorite analogy is that a lot of people bought chickens and have them in their backyard now and use them for eggs. And the first thing chickens do when they're stressed is they stop laying eggs. So if anybody who makes the argument that an egg-laying chicken is completely stressed out and miserable in their conditions, but yet the whole business model is based on that chicken ain't laying an egg, the only way that can happen is that it is not stressed and it is healthy. And so I think it's really important that we constantly, as operators, we're constantly putting that first when we're making our management decisions, because more often than not, the well-being of that animal, the welfare of the animal, does relate directly back to your production efficiencies, which is our main benchmark that we use when we're measuring ourselves as a company and our business. So production efficiencies, you can measure those in a lot of different ways. We do a couple of different things. We really look at maximizing our production per acre is one of the first things that we look at. So we don't look at the number of calves born. We don't look at the number of lambs born. We do, but in this measurement, you have X amount of acres. It's all under fence. We pay a flat overhead fee to maintain that pasture on that deal. And so the most pounds produced per acre is your best efficiency number that you can reach for. So we look at, you take your stocking densities for cattle and sheep, and you take your meat sales, wool sales, and add them all together and divide it by the animal unit to come up with your acreage. There's a couple of other things that we do. one of the deals that I like putting together is we look at our lambing efficiencies,
Mhm.
and I can actually do a screen share and show you one of our grids that we use to kind of measure this. So we take our total number of sheep, and we have two different lamb camps that we work out of. And let me get the screen share going. This is one of the charts that we use when we look at our production efficiency from a lambing barn perspective. So we look at our total lambs per current use. So this is after exposed and they've lambed out, kind of what's lambed and what hasn't. That's the lambing percentage based on that. Then we have our lambing percentage taking any dries out. So that gives you your current point of date lambing percentage. Then we look at our cost of labor per lamb. So we have fixed labor units per different ranch. And so you can see at this Mayhood ranch, we had 181 lambs per employee. The Goose Haven Ranch, we had 323 lambs per employee that were working during that lambing time. And so you can see your efficiency costs are completely different. You're almost double in cost at this place versus this place because of and it's all tied to the management of the number of sheep there and the labor and things you put in. When we go to alfalfa, we look at kind of our moving. So as they move on to alfalfa, we have ratios. This was our most recent lambing, so those numbers don't apply because they all stayed in the hills. Then we look at our total death loss and our post-birth death loss. Those two are different numbers. The first number is all dead lambs, so that includes all stillborns, everything. This post-birth is lambs after 24 hours. So if they make it the first 24 hours, then they are going to this category. If they die 24 hours or sooner, then they are down here. Then we look at the total number of heavy ewes per jug. That's a small corral that we put in.
Okay.
So we look at that number to try to keep that ratio balanced as far as how many sheep are running through the system. Average number of lambs per day. Real lambing percentage doesn't really count. Well, it counts down here on this. It doesn't count on a per bar, but that is total number of lambs born per ewes exposed to a ram. So
Okay.
that's going back 5 months and looking at that number of ewes you started with, and so that gives you all the lambing percentage that you have. And then this is our alfalfa pounds that we've fed per ewe. So one fun thing to look at is, so you go up here and you say, gosh, we put twice as much labor into these Goose Haven ewes than these Mayhood ewes. But then you go down here and you put 3 times the amount of alfalfa feed into them versus here. So when you actually back off cost out and what it actually looks like, you got to factor all those costs in. So
Sure.
I feel that it's always important to look at a variety of numbers, never just one, but we do that. And if you want to go back, you can look at some of the other, this was our last fall. So this would be 2019 October lambing. This would be 2018 lambing.
Okay.
And you can see some of those numbers and how they change or move around or things. I didn't put the death loss in here yet, so that's why it's 0. It's not like we had 0. But anyway, that shows you kind of difference. And then we track back year over year. So then this is the previous, this would be 17 and this would be 16. So anyway, that's kind of one of the numbers that we looked at. Oops. I'm going to stop share. So that's one measurement on the sheep side that we look at, but really it's about measuring the maximum production you can get over a fixed overhead.
Right. We do something similar on a much smaller scale, obviously, but we track our variable costs and then our overhead costs as well. You disappeared.
Yeah, I'm listening to you.
So we do something very similar in terms of trying to look at what our gross margin is, which would be our total production minus our variable costs. So things like feed costs or vet costs that go up and down by the number of sheep that we're running. We also look at some of those lambing numbers like you do, I think I'll adjust that a bit, because I think I like the level of detail that you're looking at in terms of labor. We're a very different setup in terms of our land management, and we pasture lamb. We don't have any barn to bring sheep into, and so we really focus on maternal characteristics in our ewes. And one of the things I realized this year that I want to track a little more carefully going forward is that the ewes that give birth on their own and can count at least to two cost us a lot less than the ewes that need our help or that can't figure out that they have two lambs. And I think if we just look at the time involved in a good maternal ewe versus one that's clueless, our own labor would really, really be starkly different in that regard. So I think adding the labor in like you've done is a really important benchmark for us to think about too. Are there some other benchmarks that you look at in terms of forage harvested or productivity of particular ranches, things of that nature?
Not yet. We're in the process of developing that. All these things take a lot of man hours and times, and so and labor has been an increasing pressure on agriculture production. Sheep, and you see it in most of the traditional commodities: sheep, beef, corn, wheat, all those kind of deals, because those prices aren't set in California. They're
Right.
set in Nebraska, for cattle, or Iowa for corn, or Colorado for sheep. And so you're not able to really price in the labor increases that are put on you by the regulatory pressures of the state you work in. And so like in California, we're looking at a 30 to 40% higher production labor costs than almost every other state in the nation, the next closest state in the nation. There are states that are half of what California is. And so in those states, when you have a farmer negotiating a cash trade that commands enough volume to influence the market, that price is going to get set there based on their margins, not on California margins. And might get some kickback from some of the other commodity groups, but like almonds or wine grapes, you can make an argument that those are a little more, they have labor cost issues,
Mm-hmm.
but they're able to put more industry production value pressure on the buyers to price in some of those increases. Rice is a good example too, where the majority of I think it's 95% of the sushi rice in the United States is grown in the northern Sacramento, north of Sacramento. So those farmers, they have those increased costs, which squeeze their bottom lines, but they as a conglomerate are able to kind of price that in because everybody's in the same boat. You look at beef cattle, you got 5-10% of the cattle in California, and you got 40% sitting in Nebraska. Well, those Nebraska boys are going to set the price, and they're not going to push as hard as this little percentage sitting out in California. And I think sheep kind of are in the same boat with the amount of sheep that go through Colorado and the Midwest system, but sheep is kind of a unique market in its own right, and so it's not quite as bad as say corn or wheat or some of those real traditional commodities.
Well, that actually kind of brings me to another question that I was thinking about this last week. We talked a lot last week about the diversity of breeds and of products and of production systems in our industry, and you touched on it just now. Is diversity in the sheep industry a weakness or a strength? And are there other industries that we might be able to learn from in terms of that diversity?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite topics. I appreciate you bringing that up. But I think we do a really good job criticizing ourselves and our neighbors in the industry and not realizing the strength we have in the diversity that exists. We're able to sell into so many different markets. You look at market research and modern market research, say the last 10, 20 years, and the number one theme that always comes back is diversity of markets. You have this huge buying group in the millennials. I was born in '84, so I'm a millennial, just barely. But they like they like diversity of choices. They like diversity of products. You have a huge, you obviously have your non-meat channel. So you have your vegans, you have your plant-based proteins, you have all these things. But these companies and groups are able to carve out their marketing niches because there's such a diversity of demand. Because you'll see that growing, and then just down the street in San Francisco, you'll see this niche butcher shop open up selling prime, traditional USDA prime beef and Wagyu and lamb and all of these proteins all right there. And down the street, it's this vegan shop. And consumers walking down the street, they're different people going into different shops, but you have solid markets for both of them. So I think it's really important to kind of embrace that diversity, because the diversity comes from the diverse environment that we have.
Right.
And you're not going to change the environment in the large scale commercial market. There's certainly some issues with inconsistency of carcass sizes and things like that, but that's more from a production efficiency standpoint. I think when you're looking at a processor having to run their chains and everything's kind of set and automated, as far as, they got guys doing the work, but it's automated as far as, these roughly this weight range of animals going to be coming through and getting worked and broken down and put into these size boxes. Well, if you have a big variety in size of lamb chop going into these boxes, you end up with 10 too small and 10 too big and nothing just right. And so there's some issues there, but with a lot of the modern technology, especially the stuff implemented in that newest plant in Dixon, is that really is not too big of a hurdle, I don't think. And by implementing some of those technologies, they're actually able to sort their cooler a lot better and use that cooler variety to supply the different markets. And you talk to any large scale processor and they got orders for all sorts of different types of products. So it's
Right.
not they demand an ununiform product, which is one of the reasons we have an ununiform product. And it's not because they want a variety of bad lamb and good lamb. They want a lot of good lamb that can service as many types of markets as possible. So I think diversity is a great thing. I think it's something we need to embrace. And that's why I think when we talked in our last episode about how important it is that you look at the production limitations of your ranch before making your genetic decisions on what your lamb's going to be, because you need to be as efficient as you can with what God has given you, not worry so much about making sure that you're just going to raise for this one perfect market. You gotta be realistic with it, and you might not get the most dollars per pound, but if you get the most pounds per acre, you beat everybody around you.
Right. One of my favorite Wendell Berry essays is an essay, probably 15, 20 years old now, that he wrote called "Let the Farm Judge." And it's largely about sheep, but one of his points is the piece of ground where you are farming or ranching has to have a say in what your livestock will be. And I think part of our challenge is figuring out, because we've got such a diversity of environments and forage bases and landscapes, even just between Rio Vista and Auburn, we're going to have diversity in our product, and that can be a strength for us. I think part of it, one of the things we realized when we were direct marketing meat, was that restaurants, because we were a relatively small number of lambs, restaurants that wanted to do portion control and have the same size lamb chop on every plate that they served couldn't use our lamb chops, because they'd get the tail of the loin or they'd get the center of the loin and things would be different. But they could take shoulders and they could take legs and sirloins, and they control the portion size that way. And that added value to something that for us at the farmer's market maybe was lower value per pound, but it was a good way to get our lamb out through a different sector of the market. It was really eye-opening to talk to some of the chefs that we worked with to figure out what worked best for them.
Yeah, I think you really touched on one of the important things when we look at the lamb market. Oftentimes you go into the grocery store and you pick up the rack and you look at the price and you say, what the heck, how am I, they're selling this for $20 a pound and paying me $1.
Yeah.
But it's really important to understand the industry's production chain, and the reason that we built this production chain from ewe lamb producer to backgrounder to feedlot to processor to retail sales. And there's a whole process along there, and there's a reason for it all. And to understand how an animal will flow through it, and different animals can skip stages depending on what they are, but to understand that each of those segments of the industry has a proper function and a very critical function to a successful industry. And your point about realizing the value of these other cuts is a big part of this understanding of the production chain. One of the biggest factors in profitability or loss of money in a packing house is going to be your offals.
Yep.
And your skins. Like that's a really big one. Lamb skins. So lamb skins are used in airline seats. They're used in Ugg boots. They're used all sorts of different things. A really high quality leather, the thick, the good number ones. And at one point, those were up over $25 each is what they were worth when Ugg boots were incredibly popular. $25 a head for one of those skins. Well, now today, almost all of the skins are going into the landfill.
Right.
And so they're actually worth -3 to -5, depending on what your deal is and how it looks to you. But those really high end stuff, they're not worth anything anymore.
Yeah.
And so when you look at when we buy lambs and sell lambs, we try to factor in a $5 to $10 a head margin is what we want per head. We try to get that number. If we can get $5 out of that lamb, that's worth it doing the process. That's like a 3 to 5% return ROI. So it's real thin, but it's ag, and ag returns are tight, and you have to keep them tight because it's competitive, right? But so if you're looking at a $5 to $10 profitability on going out and buying a feeder lamb and reselling it as a fat, and you take your skin, and this is just one segment. There's all these other parts of this too, but you take that one segment, and it can be worth $25 one year, and it can be worth -3 the following year. Well, that just that's terrible.
Your margin. Yeah.
It destroys your margin, very quickly. And so you go down the list. You go down casings, and you go down.
Right.
A lot of these offal products are exported or sold into these niche type markets. And when they dry up, like the effect of the coronavirus, one of the biggest effects is really the effect on that international flow of goods back and forth, which a lot of these offal products fall into that category. And these packing houses, you look at the beef cutout, you look at the lamb cutout values and those kind of things, they have big profitability when you look at those racks and those legs. But when you actually pull back and look at the value of that whole lamb, there's been a complete collapse in a segment, and then the stuff that the price gets reported on is still pretty strong. So, it's really easy to blame the packer and say they're taking all the money, but at the end of the day, it's a tough industry, and a lot of times you don't see where they lose their money, and vice versa. When they're making a ton of money on those offals, you don't see that either. So It is a double-edged sword, but I think it's really important to understand that. And when you look at direct sales, one of the biggest mistakes I think people make when they do the direct sales is they chop the lamb up in too many pieces. They sell the racks, they sell the legs, and then they have a bunch of neck meat and shakes and things that can't move. So.
Well, and I think the other thing, having been a direct marketer for a number of years, I think it's easy to undervalue your own labor in terms of the marketing, sales, and distribution of that product. If you like working for free, go for it. But you got to value your own time and labor, or whoever is doing that part of the business. And I think that's a real challenge. I think the other challenge, and I've had this conversation here recently with folks locally, even folks who direct market have some tie to what the commodity market is. So I can't show up to the farmer's market with $100 leg of lamb and expect very many people to buy that from me. I'm not a price setter, even at the farmer's market. There has to be some connection to reality in terms of what the retail value of my product is, or I can put whatever price I want to on it, but until it actually sells, I haven't made a dime. And I think that's one of the fallacies about direct marketing that we sometimes forget about as well, is that there is this tie to the bigger industry that we need to understand as well. So economics and benchmarks and all that stuff can kind of be gloomy right now, but there had to be something in the last week that brought you a lot of satisfaction or happiness in your business or your family. So what was the highlight of the last week, and what are you looking forward to this coming week?
Well, I got a couple of highlights. Number one is I received a freshly roasted pack of Pete's Coffee Beans in the mail today. I'm pretty stoked about. That was a big plus. Of course, Easter Sunday is such it's a great holiday and great day and good day to celebrate with our family. It was weird this year because we didn't have the big family meal, but we made the best of it and were able to kind of pass out some meals to some friends and family, and it was really a good time.
Nice.
Business wise, the wool market's terrible. It's like everything else. It's hard to get bids. The lamb market is incredibly disappointing right now. I think a lot of people don't realize how bad it really is. And there's a lot of hope because we sold some $2 a pound, 100-pound lambs here 2-3 weeks ago. Yeah. But I wouldn't be surprised if we saw $1 a pound, 100-pound lambs here in the next couple of weeks. So it'll be really interesting to see how this all shakes out. Because the biggest issue is there's just no buyers right now. There's too much unknown. There's too many issues going on. And then, of course, I think I mentioned the wool market's hard to get buyers for as well. But on the good side of the wool market is that we sell our wool directly through an American production chain and an American brand, Imperial Yarn. And fortunately for us, that's been a long-term relationship. And they're still doing good, and they're still going to take the wool, and that's all still going to move. So, that's really positive. And I just love this time of year. I love getting out to the wool press. I was out at the Neighbors with Sharon, and the crew's coming to us tomorrow, and I was able to go through his wool and see it. And you start getting that lanolin under your fingernails, and it just gets exciting. And I'm really excited to see the clip this year. I'm sure we'll talk about it next week because I'll be in the middle of it. But yeah, it looks a little maybe a little shorter than the last couple of years, but I was really, my biggest concern was it was going to be dirty. And the wool I saw coming off the day of the Neighbors, it looked clean. It looked good compared to past years. And that's really nice. If you can get decent yield, you got something to sell. So pretty exciting on the wool. And in all bad economic news, all bad markets and all things, there's always opportunity, always. And it's just not in what you're doing at that moment a lot of times, or you just got to step back and be able to find where that opportunity is. And so when these bad things are happening around, there's usually good things to find. One thing that I do think it's important for every American producer out there that has a payroll, they need to look into and call their bank and apply for the Payroll Protection program. That is a huge support that was passed in the CARES Act. Our company just received funding for our loan from that. Yesterday we put in today we got approved finally. We put in the application, I believe, on Wednesday. So it took like 3 days to get accepted and approved, and 2 days to process the paperwork. And it basically backfills your rent, your labor, and your utilities expenses for the 8-week period from the funding of the loan to the end, and 100% of it can be forgiven if used for labor, and then they'll forgive 25% of the rent and that. So it's a really big support for the industry that's getting hit really hard. So that's a real big positive, and I seriously consider anybody who has even if you don't have labor and have rents and utility bills, look into it, call your banker, because it's, no money's free money, but the reason they passed it is because it locked everybody up and shut off the restaurant trade, which is the income to support the industry. So they did this to help keep us afloat through this. So take advantage of it, and and participate in it, because we need to keep the industry alive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Good advice. So I think the
How about
highlight
you? What's positive?
positive this last week. Easter's always positive, and we did barbecue lamb like we normally do, and had some fresh California artichokes, which was a real treat. And we did get to have a video conference with my extended family on Sunday night after we all had supper, which was really fun. Um, Always good to laugh with people you'd rather be sitting around a campfire with, but at least we got to see everybody, and that's always a highlight. We also, so on a much smaller scale, we shear our own rams just because our sheep shearer is significantly older than I am, and we've decided we want to keep him coming, so we'll shear the bucks. And we got that done this weekend and got them kind of turned out where they'll be for the next couple of months, which is always a good feeling to get started with that. We don't shear our ewes until Mother's Day weekend, so we got a little time before we'll be shearing, but it does feel good to get lanolin all over your hands, and it's one of those. There's kind of these mileposts, I think, in our year that I always look forward to, and that's one of them. And the other one for us will start tomorrow. Our irrigation season in the foothills here is set pretty much in stone, April 15th through October 15th. So tomorrow morning the water will come on, and I'll be out moving sprinklers like I will every day for the next 6 months. So not sure that's a highlight yet, but it'll be nice to be back into spring work.
That's good to know it's spring.
Yep.
It's nice to be reminded the world turns.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. So next week, same time, same channel.
Sure, absolutely.
You'll be in the middle of shearing. We'll have to maybe we'll catch you out at the shearing shed, huh?
Maybe, yeah, we'll do that. I'll have to see if the internet connection is good enough, but if it is, we'll do it and go from there. But yeah, I'm excited about it, and it'll be a wool episode, I think.
I think it should be. It should be.
I don't know if I can think about anything other than wool, but I'll try.
Well, have a great week.
All right, Dan, take care.
Thanks.